If you take a moment to think about Porsche, what comes to mind? Precision, engineering excellence, a design philosophy that seems to have been set in stone since the dawn of time. Well, what if I told you that one of the most important Porsches ever made wasn't entirely a Porsche at all? That, in fact, it was partially Italian, sculpted by one of the most eccentric designers of all time, and had the build quality of a badly hammered beer can. This is the 356 Carrera GTL Abarth, a car that rewrote Porsche's racing book, but has somehow been cast into the shadows of automotive history. Now, to understand how a Porsche ended up in the hands of an Italian tuning outfit best known for tinkering with Fiats, you need to understand the landscape of late 1950s motorsports. Porsche had built its reputation on small, lightweight cars that punched far above their weight. But by the end of the decade, their beloved 356 was starting to show its age. Competitors like Alfa Romeo and Lotus had figured out how to extract more speed from their featherweight machines, and Porsche's once dominant races were now being left behind. Ferry Porsche, son of legendary Ferdinand Porsche, knew that something had to be done. The solution? The newly revised FIA rules allowed manufacturers to modify their race car bodies so long as they didn't drastically reduce weight. It was a loophole, tailor-made for a company that had built its name on outsmarting the competition. Enter Carlo Abarth, an Austrian-turned-Italian mad genius with a knack for squeezing every last ounce of performance out of an engine. Having already made a name for himself tuning and building Fiat-based race cars, Abarth was handed the 356B chassis and given a simple brief: make it faster. Now Abarth, never one to do things halfway, immediately stripped the 356 down to its bare bones. The original steel body was deemed too heavy, too clumsy, and about as aerodynamically efficient as a garden shed. So it was thrown away. In place, Abarth enlisted Franco Scaglione, a designer with a penchant for creating some of the most dramatic and futuristic automotive shapes of the era. The result was a body that was lower, sleeker and sharper than anything Porsche had made before. It featured a much narrower frontal area, recessed door handles, and a newly developed rear engine cover scoop, reducing the drag coefficient from 0.398 to 0.365. But, and this is a rather large but, the first prototype, bodied by the tiny Italian coach builder Fiorenzo and Filipponi, was a disaster. The build quality was so abysmal that when the car arrived in Stuttgart, Porsche's engineers nearly sent it straight back to the scrap heap. Yet despite its questionable craftsmanship, it showed promise on the track, and Ferry Porsche saw potential. The car was promptly entered into the 1960 Targa Florio, where it miraculously took a class victory, proving that Abarth and Scaglione might actually be onto something. Porsche, unwilling to suffer more of the same Italian panel bashing, found a slightly more reputable coach builder, Rocco Moto, to produce the next batch of GTLs. The quality improved marginally, but each car still had unique quirks, as if built by a team of craftsmen who weren't entirely convinced they were working on the same car. That said, the lightweight aluminium body, combined with Porsche's newly revised 692 3A Carrera engine, turned the GTL into a force to be reckoned with. Speaking of the engine, at the heart of the 356 Carrera GTL Abarth was a 1.6-litre Fuhrmann-designed 4-cylinder boxer engine. Now, this wasn't just any old flat 4, it was a masterpiece of overcomplication. Featuring 4 overhead camshafts, dual ignition, and a dry sump lubrication system. If you are wondering why Porsche engineers thought this was necessary for a 1.6-litre engine, the answer was simple: because they could. When tuned to its most aggressive specification, the engine produced 165 horsepower, which was an absurd amount for the time, and more than enough to make the lightweight Carrera GTL a class-dominating machine. On paper, the Carrera GTL Abarth was unstoppable. It was lighter, more aerodynamic, and more powerful than its competitors, and in many cases, it delivered on that promise. It secured class victories at the Nürburgring 1000 kilometers, the Sebring 12 hours, which it took twice, and the Daytona Continental. while also notching 3 consecutive class victories at Le Mans from 1960 to 1963. But because this was still effectively an Italian-German Frankenstein, reliability was a recurring nightmare. The engine, with its labyrinth of camshafts and gears, had a nasty habit of eating itself, if not maintained with absolute precision. Meanwhile, the hand-built bodywork, charmingly inconsistent in its fit and finish, sometimes resulted in aerodynamic quirks that engineers had to iron out on a case-by-case basis. But despite its mixed track record, the Carrera GTL Abarth was, in many ways, the car that shaped Porsche's future. It was the first Porsche to truly embrace aerodynamics as a weapon, and its design heavily influenced the development of the soon-to-be legendary 911. While Porsche has never officially admitted that the 911 borrowed from the GTL, a quick glance at the 901 prototype tells you all you need to know. Yet, for all of its influence, the Carrera GTL Abarth has been largely forgotten. Only 20 or so were built, and they were quickly overshadowed by Porsche's later racing successes. Today, surviving examples sit in museums or private collections, rarely spoken about outside of the nerdiest Porsche circles. But to end this video off, the Carrera GTL Abarth may not have been perfect. It may have been a cobbled-together temperamental machine prone to mechanical fits, but it was also brilliant. It was the kind of car that could simultaneously win races and drive its mechanics to madness. And if that doesn't sound like the blueprint for every great Porsche that followed, I don't know what does. But let me know at the end of this video, what do you guys think of this car? If you guys enjoyed this video, please have a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you guys did like it, you'll most probably like most of my other stuff. So just go through my channel, see if there's something else you like. I'll check you guys in the next one. Cheers, eh?